All right, and bear with me for one moment and I will put the agenda up for you, Nick.
So,
Can folks online are able to see that? Yeah.
Okay.
Alright.
So our first item is the minutes of the September 16th meeting. Any discussion issues or
would you like a motion to approve?
motion to approve them unless there's any?
Well, you can have a discussion after we put the motion on, all right?
Okay,
I'll move that we approve the minutes. Second.
okay.
Oh, Fred, you, is that you in a second?
I did.
One second. Okay, take a vote. Starting with Michael,
Aye.
Artie,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Bill,
Yes.
Sanjay.
Aye.
Who do we have up there? Cameron,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
Nick, I think in the future, you can bypass a vote on that by saying unless anybody has any changes, we'll put these on file.
By acclamation. Okay,
Yeah,
Thank you.
the consent agenda if you want.
now. This is one that discussion of we had a request to write a letter of support for the MBTA zoning article for the town meeting in 2 weeks. And I thought I have a very brief overview of the housing plan that if you want to share.
Do you want me to share the article? Share the draft letter.
If you would, I was gonna just highlight a couple of things if you want to give me, can I?
Oh, do you not have permissions?
Because I went back and read,
I see. I'm fixing that right now.
Just out of curiosity, where did the request come from?
It came from the select board. How about now? Does that work?
Yeah.
Great.
okay, so. Just have to-
Oh, sorry.
What, to start with, in the roadmap, we actually have an item under the transportation goals to revise local zoning requirements to ensure compliance with MBTA community zoning law. And we created this item before the current plans were settled on. And the rationale behind this, just to recap, is really that new construction is built to higher codes. Increasing density downtown will allow for more use of public transportation, more walking, more bicycling, which fills in with everything else that's in the transportation goals within the climate roadmap. We're also looking at areas that are already built up that have a lot of parking lots. So that's the rationale behind this. And I summarized the two plans. We've been asked if we would support the plan. There's the basic plan and the neighborhood plan, which there's a 74-page document available, but you're looking at a lot more possible units with the neighborhood plan. And I think that the thing we keep emphasizing is that this is the potential. It's not a case of if you build it, they will come. It's a case of if you allow for it, they might build it. They might come. So that's the general gist of the zoning options. And we can have further discussion, I guess, whether we want as a committee to issue a letter supporting this change. If so, do we want to support a particular plan? Or do we want to just say, pass one of the two plans?
You know, I will ask.
The select board has reached out to a number of the committees who they feel like have some interest in compliance with MBTA zoning. And given that this was a priority in the climate action roadmap, it was kind of a given that we might be asked to weigh in. They've received several letters from other committees so far. I know Paul very kindly shared the letter that was sent from the mobility committee, which is, I would say, kind of a template that was used to create our letter. But that's kind of the reasoning behind that.
So just so I, connecting the dots, I just want to make sure it's appropriate. Just what we want is, in theory, denser, more denser units, or having more density downtown favorable. Is that to climate change? Is that what we're saying? That having more people in the denser area is good for the climate?
May I answer? I think what we're saying is that
I'm not talking about the plan itself. I just want to make sure that, because I got to opine on this 3 different times.
Yeah.
I think the idea is that increased population will happen if we're going to add, let's say, 3,000 units. It's better to put it on places that are already built up than to subdivide half-acre lots into quarter-acre lots. So it allows people to walk more. One of the things within this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Artie, is I believe this allows 1 parking space per unit as opposed to 1.5.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
So it encourages people to,
that
it
was-
both recognizes the fact that if people are living in a multifamily, they may not have 2 or 3 or 4 cars, and it encourages them in that direction.
It's not displacing any less climate friendly.
the existing buildings are not, well, certainly won't be as climate friendly as new construction.
Oh, sure, that'd be true. That's true anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
That's true
yeah, that's right.
anyway.
I mean, of course, tearing something down that already exists is not super climate friendly in general. But yeah, having people have a higher possibility of walking to public transportation or walking to the stores is better we'll have probability less cars on the road. And from that standpoint, it meets a climate goal. From that standpoint, whether we should adopt one over the other, I don't personally feel we should adopt one over the other. I may be somewhat being overly biased because I'm on the planning board, so I'm not trying not to weigh one over the other.
Right.
But I don't think we should necessarily encourage one over the other. I think we should just say that they are both plans are meeting what the goal is for the Climate Action Committee for a reduction on our carbon footprint and a probability of less cars on the road and some other wording we want to put in there. I think it's appropriate to say something. I don't think it's appropriate to say one over the other.
What's the actual request we had from the select board to just?
Was just to weigh in on whether we supported compliance with MBTA zoning act. So they didn't ask us to pick a plan. They asked us if we would like to weigh in on and support.
Yeah, because I mean, we're being asked in our capacity as a climate action plan,
Yeah.
which if we're just asked to weigh in support of complying, clearly it is a climate friendly plan to increase it. But I mean, to Artie's point, you know, you could get into a long discussion of whether
I don't
one or
think,
the other, I think it'd be complicated.
yeah.
And
we're
the
being-
letter,
I don't think.
yeah.
We're being asked to, in our capacity as members of the Climate Action Committee, unless we felt, you know, some other capacity we couldn't do it, do we believe that complying and having a plan is a climate friendly, it supports
It
the
helps,
work of our
it'll
committee?
help us meet our goal of reduction of, relatively speaking, reduction of greenhouse gases per population.
It looks like
Population.
Stephen has his hand raised if you want to weigh in, Stephen. Oh, I think you're on mute, Stephen.
Sorry. Yeah, I do think it's important for us to keep, you know, within our charter about reducing carbon. And I think there's several things that we need to consider. One is that the density does, you know, on a per capita basis, reduce the carbon footprint of those residents. The larger the construction is, the higher the benefits are for net zero, which is what would happen with multifamily housing. They'd have to be built to passive house standards. And so, you know, a short passive house is less efficient than a tall passive house. So there are benefits there to larger construction and of course the transportation. But the other thing that I think we need to keep in mind for compliance perspectives is the state has made very clear that towns that are not in compliance will lose access to many state programs, including things like green communities, the Climate Leaders Communities program that we're looking at, the Municipal Vulnerability Act funding that we've taken advantage in the past. So there's a financial component to this that is directly related to some of the other activities that we're trying to accomplish. So I think on both fronts, both just on its merits, the MBTA Communities Act is consistent with our charter, but also preserving the funding sources that we're using for other climate reduction, carbon reduction activities.
Gabby, I think you talked about a grant. Last week, you talked about a grant we received, which we potentially wouldn't receive if we weren't compliant.
That's right. They've already taken away from Milton.
Funding source.
Yeah, my understanding is if we've already been awarded the funds, like some of those grants like Green Communities, for example, because we have been in compliance with the MBTA zoning act so far, that enabled us to get access to those funds. Now that those funds have been awarded, I don't think they can be taken away. But for the next fiscal year, if we apply again, which I strongly anticipate that we would not be eligible to apply for those funds.
And honestly, it's probably the biggest incentive for us to support it, is our access to grants, which are a very important part of, I think you could debate the merits, you know, pro and con, you know, about density and, but be that as it may, you know, I'm very supportive of the plan, of getting the plan done. For lots of reasons, least which we have financial incentives. As any committees support the new plan.
Well, I think it's been a mix. I know mobility supported the neighborhood plan, right, Paul? Yeah. But I understand that some committees are just saying they, you know, support Needham's compliance with MBTA zoning.
is the select board taking a position on one plan or the other?
They will.
They
will.
They haven't
They
yet.
have to.
Okay.
They
You know, I
haven't.
think you can venture a guess where it is, and I get a sense of where this committee may be heading. But
I
we
mean,
don't,
us, we're the finance committee, we have to apply.
yeah, and they still have to apply it.
Looks like Cameron has her hand raised.
So are we discussing whether or not we're going to say that we support the zoning? Because it doesn't sound like we have a choice to support the zoning because the zoning act is coming whether we like it or not. And they're not asking for support, are they?
We have the option, I thought about adding a third column to this table here, which is do nothing. We have the option to say to the select board, no, thanks, we won't take a position.
And then therefore we'd lose access to funding. So I mean, it feels
Well,
like,
No.
It's just
No.
to say like the climate action committee would not be taking a position on
Gotcha.
this issue as it goes before town meeting later this month.
Okay.
But
But
it was,
Cam-
I'll still leave it up to the,
I think Cameron was asking a different question though. Cameron, were you asking, will the MBTA Communities Act become law in Needham without any other?
Yeah, that's basically what I was asking. I mean, it's gonna
Town,
have to.
town meeting has to vote in the affirmative, and they need to vote 2/3 on the affirmative because it's a zoning bylaw. There are 2 towns in Massachusetts that have voted, well, one that voted for it, but then rescinded it through a
Petition.
yeah.
Petition.
And then one that chose not to vote at all. Both of them are currently being sued by the state.
Right. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that there's
Yeah.
not really, we don't have a choice. And I feel like saying that we support this is kind of like a, I don't know, like a soft tap, because obviously as a climate action committee, we would need to support something like this. I think there's like 2 of our goals from the roadmap that go hand in hand with this. So is there any way that we could word something stronger that's saying more than we support this, but I don't know.
We can cite
Should-
specifics of why we're.
Yeah, I think
supporting.
you
Yeah,
would want to cite why we support, voting in the affirmative and, complying, because the law applies, the law is there. The question is, do we wish to opine in favor of one or the other of the plans, or do we just want
I
to
think we
say that?
should. I mean, that's my opinion, but I think I'm outvoted on that.
Well,
I think we should
Oh,
say
we're-
our advice on what it is that we think is the best approach, but
I think we have 2 votes really. One is, should we send a letter? And 2 is, should we endorse one plan or the other? And the letter that Gabby, Paul and I drafted we put in brackets the neighborhood plan.
you stop sharing, I can
yeah.
share the letter.
And try to lay out, keep it to 1 page, but lay out those arguments that are climate specific as to why we should do this.
Are both plans the requirement of the MBTA?
Yes.
Yes.
One is to basically barely,
Meets
to
minimum.
meet the minimum requirements. And the other is to go, above and beyond that to allow for potentially more robust building.
We can also, there are certain, I won't call it a third way, but we can articulate the reasons why, something like they were planned, the more that is done.
Yeah.
The better the impact on the climate. We don't have to say we are endorsing one, we can just make clear that we think this is a good idea. And, it's clear that as you get more density and you get more close to transportation, it will help our climate goals further. We don't have to say that we voted that everyone should vote for the plan, but that it's clear that the more you do, the better it is for the climate.
I think that's.
And people can take
that's a reasonable
that as an
way- I think
opinion.
that's a reasonable way to approach it.
Which I think the letter encapsulates that in terms of, denser housing.
So could I respond to that just real quick?
Sure.
So I'm not going to take a position, but Michael proposed a sort of like a way of, without endorsing one of the plans, implying that the neighborhood housing plan would do more for climate. And I think what Cameron may have been saying a minute ago is, if that's the case, if we think the neighborhood housing plan will do more for climate, why wouldn't we say that and endorse that? Am I putting words in your mouth, Cameron? I'm sorry if I am.
I mean, I'm in favor of either. I think that we just need to make it really clear on, I don't want it to be a softball of, yeah, we support it. I want it to have some teeth to the letter. And if we, want to compromise and say that we want to imply it versus specifically stating it, I'd be happy with implying it also, but We're a group, we're a
Yeah.
team.
Okay, so
And I
maybe
wasn't advocating for that. I was just saying that is an alternative. People are uncomfortable making a choice and feeling they have other things that they're concerned about, or want to consider.
I get that maybe if you're in a general position, I guess I'm thinking from a climate perspective. Michael, do you feel that the neighborhood housing plan is better for the climate than the non-neighborhood housing plan?
From what I know of it, I would conclude that because it is increasing density, it's gonna have, as you said, the bigger buildings, we can be more efficient. There will be more people living close to transit. So it's clear that, the more of that kind of construction that you can do, the better it will be for the climate. I think that seems to follow logically. There may be other reasons why the community chooses to go different directions, but from a climate perspective, I think that's true. That's why I say we can say that. We say that we support it, we can say that, and saying that, we did not want to take a position on those because there were other
Yeah.
that was what I want to offer.
Yeah, could I make one more point or question? Because I think there's a lot that we're not necessarily saying that we need to air. I think there's a lot of us in this group right now that have two hats or more. And it makes it difficult for us maybe to publicly say which of these plans we are voting for. I mean, speaking for myself, I sit in town meeting. I'm on this committee. I'm also married to a select board member who's working on this project. So there's a lot of potential conflicts there that I need to be open about. And Artie, I think you were alluding to your role in the planning board, but I think one of the ways to do that is to be very specific about which hat we're wearing here. Because there
Well,
are
that is,
considerations.
the vote is to represent the Climate Action Committee. It does not
Right,
say
not-
how any
not
of us
me.
is gonna vote at town meeting, which is
That's-
why I was suggesting that, when you say as Climate Action Committee members, we believe this plan has, a stronger impact, positive impact on the climate, we're just stating what we believe as Climate Action Committee members, not saying we individually are gonna vote for it.
Right, because I mean,
Right.
you might
Yeah,
have a
I
very
would-
different
I would-
opinion on the school committee, for example. Or,
Right.
or on the finance committee for Barry, right? I think we have to be sure about what hat we're putting on here.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, you've been very helpful, Stephen, about saying, keep us within our lane on, what's the climate impact? And I fortunately only have one hat, but that's why I think I don't have a problem taking a stand, and my personal belief is that the neighborhood housing plan is a better option, a more climate friendly option, and also recognizing that these are aspirational without getting into any of, we're not getting into any of the other impacts.
Right.
And I will say that I after reading the letter from the mobility committee, I thought, okay, they're actually they opted to take a stand, and I thought that made I was impressed by that.
Well, that's what discussion is about, which is, it's great to have this discussion, get to a point and understanding of why we may want to do one or the other, whether endorse specific or don't endorse specific, just general. It's good to have the discussion, because it is a very valid point, is we are wearing specific hats in this meeting right now. And it does not represent anything beyond that, even though the planning board has already endorsed sending both and essentially endorsed the neighborhood, I believe that's what we're sending, where our attention is. And when we're gonna be at town meeting, that's what we're endorsing, the benefit of the second one. And so, but it is good to have, as mentioned, I am trying to be careful not to, bring bias into it. But it's a good thought that Stephen had. We're wearing very specific hats. We're in here, this is what our charter is, this is our charter. Our charter is not the school committee, the population of the schools per se, that's not our charter. Our charter is what is happening with the climate and how does this benefit or not benefit within the meeting community.
Yeah, and I think that the members who are representing other committees or are part of other, your perspective as a planning board member or conservation committee or school committee inform these discussions, but they don't, doesn't mean that you're speaking for conservation commission, but you're speaking, from your inside view, I guess, but. And,
Is there, whenever I'm thinking of anything, I always like to step out, and step back into it. Is there anything in these two plans that has a negative impact on the climate? Is there any negative aspect of this? I always look, and when we were talking about trees, we were on the natural resource committee. We had all kinds of lists of things we wanted to prioritize. Everyone voted separately, we prioritized it. Then we went back and said, let's look at it again. We prioritized it. We looked at it again and came back to essentially the same decision eventually. So so that's why, is there anything on any of these, which is a negative? There probably isn't, but I don't know. Is there anything?
The only thing that comes to my mind is that even though you have fewer cars per person, you could still have a traffic problem if the density goes up too much, too fast, and it's not, things aren't developed for it. That's, that's not an immediate, it's not gonna be a tree problem because the density allows you to preserve more open space, right? And that's still good. But if the quality of life suffers, then that's an issue too.
Since climate is global, if those people move somewhere, they're still gonna have traffic impact from climate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, keeping it focused on climate, I think it's hard to find stuff that you would really, they're always unintended consequences. So.
I skimmed with regard to that, I tried to read the traffic report, and Paul, maybe you have more insight, but it seemed that what they were saying was that either plan would be preferable at key choke points. I think there were 19. Okay, close, like I said, but that either one of these would not impact traffic as much as a similar rate of growth. And anyone correct me.
No,
an angle
you
there.
might have said that slightly backwards. If we don't do anything, a natural progression rate of growth would have, this rating, A to F rating. And if we do the base one, it'll be a little bit higher than doing nothing. And the neighborhood one will be a little bit higher than that. I think when we looked at the traffic study, the neighborhood one was a little bit worse than the base, which is only a little bit worse than the natural progression. So at least in the traffic study, they weren't saying there was a major problem in traffic. Now it's a little, and there were also there were already a number of intersections, already a number of mitigations we're gonna be doing anyway. Then there's a few other mitigations we can do. Now, again, but like you said, I mean, you have a good point is, the more, it isn't always merrier the more, but the more cars is not great. But until we have an alternative, people if they stop driving cars, that would be great. But the neighborhood plan is built in the sense that stop driving cars is most.
The only thing I would add is like, if people don't end up using MBTA and decide to use their car to go wherever they need to go, then there could be some problems.
Yeah.
I think clearly it supports some of the goals that we're trying to do. And pointing that out is probably what's most important in the letter. That and our continued desire to access state grants, which could be jeopardized. I think those points alone kind of make the argument from this committee's perspective that we should be in favor of a plan, not necessarily advocating. I kind of personally would prefer to keep it neutral as to which plan, but the reality is, I think, it's important to pass a plan.
I think we could, state support for a plan and then have sort of an advisory tone to comment on the choice of the two plans. Saying that, you know, by criteria 1 and 2, this is an improvement on our climate goals. And the neighborhood plan is likely to have a more robust improvement than the basic plan. And that doesn't say we are in favor of one or the other. We're just sort of giving an analysis of how we think.
That's in essence what I was proposing.
So-
Is we articulate that there is a, you know, a greater benefit, potential greater climate benefit, because that's all we're piling on, is the climate benefit. You don't have to say you should vote for it.
I have a thought, which would be first to take a vote on whether to endorse the plans, which is actually 4 zoning articles, because there's 2 for the basic and 2 for the neighborhood. And then if that passes, then we can have a second vote discussion on, you know, do we want to strengthen that support? Does that make sense to split it up in
Sure.
2 ways?
Do we want to support a period? Which way do we want to? Support?
Yeah, so
I can make a motion for you.
thank you.
I move that the Climate Action Committee vote to endorse the MBTA Communities Act by sending a letter to the select board.
Second.
It's to the planning board.
Oh, to the planning board, sorry.
Oh,
And that's the
once.
planning board.
Twice.
You're the sponsor.
That's right, we're the sponsors, right?
Okay.
But the select
Do you want-
board asked.
Second, we need
I
a new,
second.
okay.
I second.
Michael,
We voted? Did we vote?
we're voting now.
Okay, aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Cameron,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Okay, so we will issue a letter. The next, I guess the question is, do we want to specifically support one or the other? Or do we want to say, you know, reword the letter to say something along the lines of, while both support our climate goals, the neighborhood housing plan is more supportive.
I think one thing I wanted to point out is that we're really talking about on a per population basis. Because if we don't do anything, we're not gonna increase the population basically. It'll rise naturally, okay? And we'll have less cars because of it, so forth and so on. And so if we don't do anything for this, then the population could grow, but it would grow in other parts of town. But it'll never grow as much as this is going to allow it to grow. But so on a per population basis, doing these plans will have a benefit to the climate. Okay? It is going to bring more cars into Needham. That's a fact. But it will replace some inefficient buildings with greatly more efficient buildings. So on a per population basis, we will be increasing the benefit to society. Is as Michael
Climate
said.
is global, because if
as
those
Michael
people
said,
don't move here, they might move to
they're going
much further out.
They're going
have a
some-
worse impact.
they're going somewhere. They're going somewhere. So they will have a benefit to the climate. And but I'm viewing it as a more of a per population.
And,
basis.
but on a, you know, within our purview in terms of looking at these
Mhm.
2 plans and the potential impact
Mhm.
of climate impact. Yeah, I guess if you're saying greenhouse gas per capita,
Well, I mean, it's already stated, we already stated in the planning board that the odds of any rebuild under the base plan are greatly reduced. I mean, the Carter factory something's gonna happen there, that's pretty much a given. But anywhere else along the strip, there'll be a little something. But the net effect will not be great compared to the doing nothing plan, which is what it's already zoned for. So if the reality is we don't vote for the higher plan, we're not gonna have a lot of changes going on in that core. Statistically speaking, just statistically speaking, that's what's gonna happen.
I was just gonna say, I think the likelihood, I mean, Chestnut Street's where the big focus is of this plan. There was only change to encourage development of Chestnut Street in 2009. There's been one development in 15 years. So the reality is, I think it's good to encourage further development. I think frankly, more important in my opinion, for this letter is to articulate why we want this instead of worrying about which plan and why, that we're signing our names because it helps, it accomplishes some of our goals. And also, the financial incentives that we started to acquire and want to continue to acquire. I think that to me is a much stronger, will have more influence than trying to be a little wishy-washy about why more housing is better for the climate and that particular street.
I think if we offer our expertise as to what variables make this better for climate, things like the higher density and higher occupancy buildings have lower heating costs. I mean, you just list a couple of things like that that make the letter a little educational to the rest of the town, and then that speaks for itself. You don't have to endorse one thing or the other.
I think if we want to maximize its effect, why don't we just take a vote? And if the vote is like 11 to 1, we can use that information to let say the majority of the committee felt strongly that the neighborhood plan was the way to go. You could put it that way. If it's like, or half and half. you could say,
Paul,
What?
is that you speaking?
Yeah.
Can you speak up just a little? It's hard to hear.
I'm sorry. So I thought we should just vote on whether people should support the basic plan or the neighborhood plan, because if the vote is unanimous, you can use that information in the letter, say that the group that unanimously or mostly by majority thought that the neighborhood plan was the way to go. If it's sort of a wish, if it's a wash, we could just put in something that says that there's general support for either plan. So a vote would be helpful, because if it was unanimous, then that would indicate the strength of the recommendation you made.
And so to take a vote, we
Yes, sir.
still, but not endorse a specific plan, but potentially incorporate the results of that vote in the letter with more specifics about bing, bing, bing,
The why.
Why.
The why as various.
Paul, are you asking are you proposing that we make a vote on whether or not to endorse a specific plan? Or are you asking, or is it?
People should say, each person should say, I endorse this plan or that plan.
But I think what,
Well, we can vote
Am I-
on the
We
neighborhood.
can get a
We've
sense, we can also
we've
get a
already
sense
voted
of the
on
committee.
so I think this is you're looking at sort of a straw poll, not a vote to make a decision that we're going to support this, but how does each member of the committee feel regarding the plan? And then that becomes an item of
I would
discussion.
say you're asking for a sense of the committee. I don't want polls, I don't want votes.
Okay,
Because those,
sense of the committee.
it just get a, if you want to do that, get a sense of the committee.
Do we need a motion to do that, or?
No,
I just-
you're just asking everyone,
Okay.
what is
Go
their
around the room.
sense?
Go around the room, Michael.
I would be comfortable supporting the neighborhood plan.
If we want to make a difference, we need the neighborhood plan.
Speaking strictly from this rural neighborhood.
I would advocate not endorsing either plan, but voting for a plan and for the reasons I articulated before and emphasizing the goal, it helps us achieve our goals in a variety of different ways. That should be emphasis.
Okay.
I think we should do that regardless how it comes
Well,
up.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Let's just stick to the consistency. Ajay?
Neighborhood.
Cameron,
The neighborhood plan.
Stephen,
Neighborhood.
and Paul,
So the neighborhood plan.
and then as Chair, or as me, I would say neighborhood as well. So then excuse me?
No, just repeating what Gary's saying, then the specifics of why.
Yeah,
Rather than going into a
so my sense though, and please contradict me, is that we want to, rather than vote and say the Climate Action Committee supports sending a letter for the neighborhood plan, that we want to articulate that the majority of the committee feels this way and here's why.
That's his hand raised.
Sim?
So I think an important question here is what do you want to be able to say? If we have a unanimous vote, or do you want to say the majority? Because with the sense of the committee, you might not get a unanimous vote on that. Do you want a unanimous vote, or do you want to just say the majority?
No, we didn't get unanimous, and that's okay.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
asking-
I mean.
Yes, I'm asking the chair how you want it to
I
actually-
would say that a large majority supports the neighborhood plan. My feeling in terms of consensus is that we all feel we'll have a stronger letter if we articulate the reasons and rather than come out and say, well, the Climate Action Committee says vote for the neighborhood plan and don't articulate those reasons.
I would agree.
Could you consider writing it in the sense of, let's say we take a vote and it's not unanimous, but we have a vote on the compliance plan separately, so we can get potentially a unanimous vote on that. And then you can say, and a large majority further endorses a neighborhood housing plan.
But see, I think you already got that.
Yeah,
We all voted to send a letter of support for these articles, so we have to support one of the two of them. It doesn't,
Okay.
we didn't say which, but.
We can clarify the letter to say that CIC unanimously supports
Adopting
adopting the MBTA zoning.
zoning in compliance with the
Yeah.
MBTA Communities Act.
And then we can further go to say that the large majority of the committee supports the neighborhood plan. We agree on the climate benefits of higher density art, which then, if someone wants to read between the lines on that, they're welcome to.
I think the key being is listing the reasons why.
But I think-
That's the key.
I want
Listing the
to
reasons why.
preserve
That's why.
Barry's concern about, I understand where you're coming from and so,
Which is, it's a very strong point that we want to articulate the reasons for supporting this, right? And you can then append to that, the sense of the committee regarding the sense of the committee, a significant majority believes the neighborhood plan does. You can say that if you want.
yeah, so do we, someone want to encapsulate this into a motion?
I just want to check before you do the motion, do you want me to try to type something up right now so that we're in agreement about the language? Because we're not gonna have another meeting before town meeting. So we have to, what do you think? Or do you wanna write?
Can we
Okay.
write something and then send it out for comments? Give us a few days.
Well, we can vote to empower someone to write the letter on behalf.
Yeah, we've done that with Chris Heap, we've done that with Lee Newman. We've said, yes, we're supporting this but we can't all respond together going on. We can respond
But
to the
with the-
chair saying any comments we have. If there's any
Yeah, well,
minor comments.
we need to have the letter go out sooner than, we're not gonna meet
Yeah,
again, so I think we just need to agree on some language.
I would
Or-
like to. I'm comfortable empowering Gabby. If she's in her spirit, perhaps, you know, with,
It's good then.
in consultation with, other members, or
No,
should
no,
we
just
specify,
the-
or, in-
The chair then, because you
okay,
can't. go back to
consultation
the-
with the chair.
Finalizing the language, setting out the reasons why we believe it's so important. I think that's what Barry, because we think that's gonna be the strongest argument for people looking at this.
And you as the chair can send out individual emails to us so we can read it before.
Because we're looking at it,
If there's something,
We have to go
if
like,
there's something.
we're
wrong,
looking at a 2-day
yeah,
turnaround.
Yeah,
something
just-
wrong.
yeah. I also just wanna, one thing that Barry had brought up was the financial benefits of compliance, and that's not articulated in the letter right now. I just wanna confirm that. That's
I would add that point, that we have significant, financial benefits that we are taking advantage of that benefit us for climate,
Mhm.
that we certainly want to maintain the access to those.
Yeah, maintain the substantial benefits we've already. Okay, are we at a point where someone wants to craft a motion?
I make a motion that we, as the committee, we're empowering Gabby to write a letter listing the benefits of the MBTA Community Act in general, and that a majority of the committee has endorsed the neighborhood plan. And the key though being that these are the line items why it is beneficial and meets the charter of the Climate Action Committee of our responsibility. You can phrase that any way you want, but that's the motion.
Stephen?
Before we take any further action, that if you want to be able to say that a majority is in support of the neighborhood housing plan, I do think you need a formal vote on that. Because you only took a sense of the committee on that.
Well, but that's in the motion, right?
Well, the
You
first
just made.
motion was to send a letter of support for compliance. That was the very first
compliance.
motion we did.
We don't have a form, what Stephen is saying,
I'm saying we don't have a formal motion on the.
formal, so we
If you-
need.
If you incorporate into what we've directed them to do, to say that we support,
I guess the question is,
yeah, that's true.
can we reference an informal sense of the committee?
No, I don't think you can. I think you need a formal vote on the neighborhood housing plan if you want to be able to say a majority is in support of it.
And this is just, so this is a vote supporting, not saying the CAC should support a particular plan, but as a member of the CAC, do you support the neighborhood housing?
No, because that's not what our mission is we're not opining on our opinions. We're supposed to be articulating.
Okay.
Actually, we'd be voting on, I think what we'd be voting on is that the neighborhood health plan meets the climate action goal ahead of, with further greater than the.
Yeah, I think you could say it
greater than the
that
base
way.
plan. We
You
could
could
say
say-
that
Okay,
that way.
Yeah.
make a motion.
I just made a
Oh,
motion.
well, you want me to try, the motion is that we would articulate that the neighborhood plan is more strongly supports climate goals than the base plan. That would be the motion.
Second,
Okay, Michael,
Aye.
Aye.
right?
Which motion are we're voting on that motion
This
that
is
Michael just
on-
made?
Yeah, just that motion that
Okay.
yeah,
Articulated that way, I would agree.
Okay, Paul Malta,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Cameron, and the chair votes aye.
So then,
I
the
can
mo-
point out that it's unanimous.
yeah,
Yes,
so then the other motion changes into make a motion that Gabby articulate, write a letter and articulate in that the benefits of the MBTA Community Act plan, and it was unanimous that the neighborhood plan meets our climate action goal greater than the base plan.
I'll second that.
okay, Michael,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Paul, Bear,
Aye.
Aja. Paul,
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Cameron?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay,
Takes your line one.
so
Oh, we got through line one?
we got through, well,
Did we? Did we really?
Item one.
the big one, yeah.
Not counting the minutes there.
So. Do you want to give me back the
The
share?
agenda, yeah. Oh, sorry, you want yeah, I was just playing with the agenda. I will stop sharing.
Let me. So our next item is the continuation of the roadmap prioritization. And just to quickly summarize, really looking at where do we go next? I'm gonna go through some of the working group templates that Gabby sent around, as well as the task list for the roadmap, and more of a general discussion on where do we go from here. I color coded the worksheet that Gabby sent, and I don't know how legible this is.
Zoom,
Let me get my binoculars for
All right. The idea being that we're looking for things that are not in process and are not completed.
I would argue that
excuse me?
even the action items that are in process, some of them could still use some discussion.
Okay,
And prioritization, like some of them include, installation of EV chargers, like some of that could use some, from my perspective, guidance on metrics for like what we want to consider, as we think about meeting goals over the next decade by decade. So I wouldn't I just say that just so that we don't completely take off the in-process ones.
that's a very good point. And
Yeah, I think on that one actually specifically, I think it'd be interesting to sort of focus on one of the, I know it, it only lists 3 and there are other potential locations where you could put them, but I think sort of emphasizing the need to, or the focus on placing them in apartment buildings versus municipal buildings and local businesses, I think could be more beneficial. That, the barrier for folks in apartment buildings that don't have the ability to charge at home, I think is more impactful than if folks are just around town and they're just charging when they're going to CVS or something. Not to get distracted, but I do agree that some of them in progress, sort of, we can nuance them a little bit.
and I think one of our goals overall is to set up a process by which, we're, the 11 of us aren't going to go through line by line, but to break up into, whether into pairs, do we want to look at reconstituting the working groups that we had when we began this process. What are the ways to really drill into some of these and then have have the groups, whether ourselves or with the broader community, how do we drill into these? Are there things that we go back and say, gee, we missed this? So looking at the, we can kind of go through the template process might be a good segue. The other thing I will say is that a lot of the in terms of goals that are in process or completed as we go further down. Sorry about that. We've started on some of the ones in terms of net zero buildings, in terms of clean energy. As we get further down into transportation, we've got some start on things, but there are a lot of things in here where, decrease single occupancy vehicle trips. None of those are in process. One of them was listed as high priority.
Did we ever talk about anything, I use the phrase minibus, trying to find some ways to decrease trips in town by having more of a minibus still going around the town, anything like that? Was that ever talked about?
The shuttle thing was like low on our list, because we didn't see it as we saw it as symbolic and useful.
Yeah.
We didn't see it as one of the top three. But lots of towns have shuttles now.
Yeah.
Electric shuttles.
Electric shuttles.
Shuttles. There are a couple models you see sort of running around. I don't know, but we dropped it.
Yeah.
Right.
And
our top three things were promote EV sales and then increase mobility through bikes and bike lanes, and then improve charger access. So those were, as I recall, those were sort of our bigger items that we were trying to.
and then Paul, Stephen and Paul.
No, I think Stephen had his hand up first.
Okay, Steve.
So I've been thinking a bit about this over the past month, and one of the concerns I have is with how many things we get started on. Given the limited bandwidth of everybody in this room, plus within the town, and I'm wondering if there's a way to think about this a little bit differently, as opposed to like trying to pick off things that are not started and getting them spinning. Like, are there things that are started that have things that are blocking and we can help unblock? Are there things that are in progress that we could also help? So for example, if another committee is working on something, like, I don't know if the bike network is in development, but are there ways that we can aid and help accelerate other ones that are in process? As opposed to trying to spin something else up that hasn't yet gotten any traction.
Paul's next.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea. It's like build the momentum. I guess sort of somewhat related to that is like, for ones related to governance, like, I think we talked last time about trying to get just some wins on the board and trying to sort of build the momentum from this group. But I was just wondering, and I'm not super familiar exactly with the process that would be required to implement those, but if there's no chance for the town to approve or incorporate some of the governance things by the end of the year, then I think we can sort of safely put those aside, and maybe, that sort of just like frees us up in order to focus on other ones and to Stephen's point, find the groups that have started something and collaborate there. But as more of a question, like, is there, like, for the governance ones, like, has the ship sailed for the town to sort of take those into account this calendar year? Is that something that would happen next year?
I think my sense is it depends on the individual items. And one of the things we tried to do in the planning process was look at what's involved in some of these. So, some things are going to take a lot more work. For example, I suspect integrating the social cost of carbon into the town's financial analysis is a much more complicated lift than educate municipal departments.
Yeah, I don't think the ship has sailed on all of these by any means. I think some of these are more just a question of bandwidth, and some of them are things that can get started with staff and like it's like be more of a staff effort, and some of these are gonna require engagement of multiple boards and committees. So, yeah.
And then
I don't think our responsibility is to be a short-term advisor here. You know, Stephen's point about the in-process, I would be happy to. I think, you know, if Gabby wants to come back to us and articulate for the in-process ones, are there ones where she feels that this committee could have an impact either on blocking or helping? That's great. I think we ought to focus our efforts on trying to look at the things that haven't gotten started and prioritizing the ones that we would like to see the town move forward on. I guess that's our mission here.
I think we have. Cameron,
So
were you?
wondering if something that Stephen was getting to, because I think he's also kind of a little bit of a software person like I am, is taking a bit of an agile approach and looking at these as how much effort is it going to take relative to the priority of like undertaking that actual thing. So maybe we go have like some sort of exercise where we go one by one, or we have a working group for each of the different subject matter and then prioritize that way, because I think we're all trying to figure out, well, how much effort is this one line item going to take? Are there simple things that we can just move around to actually knock things off the backlog, so to speak? Is that something that we could do? Maybe have like a session where we do that, or I don't know if that's what you were getting at, Stephen.
It's a different but important point. Yeah, we have to figure out how do we make both our time effective, but also the staff, you know, that would be assigned to this. And I think if we throw too much in here, we risk bogging ourselves down on process.
Yeah, I think I threw up the template just because we're sort of leading into that, and I think we don't want to reinvent the process the year and a half that we spent developing the roadmap, but we want to look back at it, look and see what do we do different. And I bringing up the templates that we used during the planning process for the people who weren't involved. This is an example of the Net Zero Building Committee, but we went through for each of these items, describing the what's involved with each item, what are the benefits, different types of action. Is it outreach? Is it legislation? What's the time frame? The urgency, the scale. They gave us different, what were we looking at? And then going into some of the things, who are the lead implementers? Who are the key partners? How do we measure this? Really drilling into it. And there's a lot, these templates are a little unwieldy, but there's a lot in them as we go back and look at them. And I think this is where coming into maybe circling back to the question of how do we do this, we might want to sort of pair off in different areas of interest as a start, and then start to look in to some of these.
Nick, is there, or anyone, is there a specific line items right now that we've already set in motion that we want to act on? If there aren't, then what are some of the next items we want to start acting on? Because I know we're looking at, once we do it, what's the process of doing it? Are there some items that we should be starting to act on now?
Well, so the Climate Action Planning Committee had identified goals for FY 25. So that's what I've been using, and those are like the goals for the year. That's what I'm hoping to bring to the select board at the close of the fiscal year, having hopefully completed. But we don't have set goals for, FY 26. Some of these, my hope is like that through this process, we could identify priorities across each of these sectors. And that would help to feed into the conversation that needs to happen after of, okay, what are we gonna plan for FY 26? What's FY 27 and so on. But I think it would be helpful to have some of this like bigger picture discussion across each of these sectors to make sure that the wheels are in motion for each of them. But I think having the input from the committee would be helpful to me to know where should things rise to the top. And I definitely hear what you're saying, Stephen, about the identifying ones that are in process and the obstacles. And that's something that I could do as well, is go back to each of those sectors and figure out which ones in particular need some extra insight from the committee in terms of how to begin addressing them, or advice on one to prioritize over another. So if that would be helpful, I can do that.
I mean, as an example, for net zero buildings, one of the items was require municipal building construction and renovation. I'm sure that's calculated body carbon, but that we are looking at net zero municipal buildings. That ties into the question we've been talking about of municipal sustainable building guidelines. So some of this, all of this is iterative and ties into other things that are going on, both on our agenda and
So
other.
I think we've talked about, we talked about some others, we talked about the public permanent building committee, we talked about in the town, that they've already, haven't they already started to implement, look at some of that stuff and what they have to do to meet what we've been talking about, for example?
For municipal sustainable building guidelines.
Have they?
So
Well, no, you have to understand that the Permanent Public Building Committee basically does what it is directed to do by.
And
That's
I didn't mean to jump ahead
Oh,
on the agenda,
But I guess, we have a lot of these, I would like us to perhaps try to focus, while we're trying to do all the areas. I mean, what have we said the big areas are? Buildings and transportation. Let's start there, right, with just what you described, right? And I think that's where we wanna, that's where we know that's where the big impact is, so let's
80%.
start with those.
Well, we know that the public, the PPVC, we have the Option Specialized Stretch Code, so we know that all new buildings going on have to match that, so we know that.
so what I'd like to do is kind of, Stephen, I see your hand.
So go ahead,
So-
Nick, finish.
Focus on the practice, sort of the general process, rather than us sitting here. We could go on for 47 hours going through line by line, and I'd like to try and set up some kind of framework where we can go through these offline and come back in November or December. Then I think Stephen was next, and then Fred.
Yeah, I think I see where you're going, Nick. I would volunteer to work with a small group on, like, to Michael's point, buildings. I think we need to focus on buildings, and we need to figure out what are the things we need to do in the short term that set us up for success, especially with something like the MBTA Communities Act coming. So I would propose we do small groups by affinity, people just kind of volunteer in what they want to work on. And I'm volunteering right now for buildings.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that last meeting, Gabby kind of gave us some homework to do. To look through this list and see what jumped out at us as fruitful. And if we could sort of hear from each of us as to what really interested us, or that might be another way of developing volunteers for the groups.
That could be a good way to. You
How about if Gabby and Ramon already have a template for what ought to be done, because with the sustainability manager, really the expert. Nice to know, you can sort of say what you think we should do, and we'll do it. And I'm serious about that. I think that's why you're here, for here to help you, but I think that your overall sense of what could or should be done in the next year or two, might need to move quickly.
That's the way we
just
combine
think-
these
yeah.
two, and if you sort of lay out, and then if people want to, after you lay out, and then if people say, well, I'll work in these.
To your process question, that's why I think it would be helpful to pick a couple of the areas and buildings and transportation, the ones to come to mind, and start that process to come back next month and have a more robust discussion about each of those. I mean, it can be two, it can be one. I almost don't care, right? But I think rather than trying to look through everything or come up with an ultimate process or review everything, let's pick one or two. Let's do either in the small groups, wherever, come back and plan for the next meeting to have a robust discussion of the things in that area. That would be helpful both in terms of what's been started and what we could start to help you plan for kind of the future.
So just so I understand, so let's say we start with buildings.
Okay.
I could take a first stab at the list and then identify ones where I feel like committee input is particularly needed. And my first pass at kind of identifying where I think things will be in terms of priorities, share that with the group, and then folks will review that before the next meeting, and then we'll discuss. And
But with the practical eye to what can get done.
yes, with a very
Yeah.
conservative approach.
But not just the short term, but there may be something you say, we are gonna need input on this because we need to get this moving for 26. Maybe that's something you want.
I think I'd like to hear, in general, the overall priorities from you, because as you pointed out very correctly, the things I grayed out because they were in process, you say we need help with these, and some of these are important. And they're in other topics, or they're things that, when we were talking briefly about trees last week or last month, it's not a high impact in terms of carbon reduction, but it's a high visibility item. So it may be something, it's not buildings and transportation, it's not in that block chart, but we may decide as a committee, or Gabby may, so I'd like to get a sense of.
But that's a lot of work.
Well, but
That's why I'm
Michael, what I'm
suggesting
saying
we
is,
pick one.
let's get a sense
Get going.
of priorities from Gabby. Let's look at, if people have specific things that they want to kind of
Yeah, related to
dig
tree,
into.
We do have time to do that.
Well, the tree ball is rolling. Could be rolling faster, but the tree ball is rolling. Something's gone from the working group from trees, it's gone to select boards, from there, we'll have a committee, so it is rolling, so there's nothing we're gonna do on that at this point. It wouldn't have any impact, because the ball's on its way, and I don't think it's faster at this moment in time. This moment.
Maybe it does make sense then to start with just one sector, and then each month we would review and provide input on the priorities. And then once we've gone through all the sectors, we can have them all up on the screen and say, all right, like, we've identified this many for this year, and that will be like a nice check to see have we identified 20 things to accomplish in 1 year, or have we identified a more reasonable number?
You don't have to go through all of them before doing anything. It's just
Yeah.
too hard to bounce around like
Well,
this.
Yeah, so if we start with one.
And let's see
then-
how it goes. I mean, we might decide they're so interconnected, we've got to do it a little differently, but I think we're a lot more likely, speaking to the bandwidth issue, if we're all focused on one thing. Right, you give us some stuff, we're all focused on one thing, so next one, we can all talk about it knowledgeably, because we've thought about that issue.
Yeah, I think that works.
I think we could do that as a process. I would also say we should look at and revise. I thought the templates, working with them were very good. I don't know if you, they're, the way they're formatted, I don't remember where we got these from KLA. They're horribly formatted. And they're spreadsheets that stretch out about 14 feet. But they've got a lot of good information that we can revisit, and some of it may be wrong. But to kind of guide us as we discuss and say, well, what's really involved.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I can, how about, I'll take the first stab at using the template to do buildings. And then if when the committee members are reviewing that, if they see tweaks they'd like to make to the template, if there's other things they think need to be included on that Excel sheet, we can make those changes, but I agree, it would be nice to incorporate information that we've already invested time in.
And, you know, to the point, we do have a lot of items in buildings that are in process.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Yeah.
So I think,
Do we need one?
well, I don't think we need a motion for it. Does any, you know, that we sort of seem to have this consensus that we're going to
Okay.
work through this item by item. I would,
Or what Gabby brings us, item.
right.
Yes, I will bring these up.
It's all up to you. Gabby.
Did you,
You got it.
I know you have so much free time, but
Yeah, all good.
were there issues with getting a shared drive, or is that just something that
There were non-issues, it
just
fell a little
fell by
lower in the
that's
priority
okay.
list this month, but I will bump that back up
'Cause
the list. to get
That
us
might be a
shared
good
drive.
way for us to do, so we're not waiting around until next month,
Yeah.
so that we can review both the plan and the,
Well, I mean,
I will get you
can
something
email
soon,
us, or
yeah,
you
I,
can email it to us.
yeah, I will email you, and as quickly as I can, I will email you a Excel for buildings, which is my first take on prioritization and items that need committee input. In particular for prioritization. So I will try to do that within this week, by the end of the week, I'll say by Friday. And then I have an idea for the shared drive, I just need to
okay.
confirm with IT that what I'm.
And I'll send you you need these anyway, but I'll send you the spreadsheets.
I need the one that you've been updating. I
Because
have
I've
the ones
been-
I sent out.
I've messed around with them.
Great, I love to hear.
So I think. Is there anything else to discuss in terms of the roadmap priorities, prioritization?
Well, I'll throw, I mentioned it earlier, and I'll throw it back out there, because as we talked, the last meeting, it's a living document, and that is that, I mean, I don't know if it'll ever come back into town, but, I mean, one of the things we were trying to do in transportation is basically have less cars on the road. I mean, we want them to be more efficient, spewing out less carbon, so, but we want less of them. I think that's a goal, and the only way we're gonna do it, in having faster, having faster streetlights and faster intersections is not gonna make less cars. And maybe it'll make them a little bit less on the road, but not less cars. And I'm gonna throw back out there, having some type of electric transportation going around the town or something, a couple loops or something. I'm gonna throw out the minibus again there, some type of electric transportation. That will have less cars on the road. If it, you know, it's a long shot, it's several years off, if it'll ever happen again. I don't remember why it stopped. Like you were in town then when it was going on, when it stopped, I don't know why it stopped, it costs money. But if we're going to reduce greenhouse gas, less cars on the road will do it. And
And the transportation, is an important one, and something that we can definitely focus on, especially with electric vehicles.
yeah, electric vehicles and
Yeah,
stuff.
people having electric cars probably
Yeah.
in the long term gonna be a little more helpful than even just minimizing the amount of gas cars there are. So we can work on like convincing people to buy electric cars when they do buy a car around now, that can also.
Yeah.
But again,
And I
So
think
that would be the next one we would,
when we get to transportation,
Yeah.
and I
when we
think,
get to it.
I mean,
The next one.
the next one, we've got the two big ones. So
Those
let's
are-
get those ones
those are-
first.
and we have Paul from the Transportation Mobility Committee, but also it was interesting at the Harvest Fair, the people doing the redesign on Great Plain Avenue, and some of the ideas that they were gathering. And so there's a lot of synergy with what other people are doing, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, we speak for the climate in with all these other committees.
But I mean, it's getting more people on bikes,
I put that item up there.
electric bikes.
Bike lanes.
Electric bikes, Less cars.
Okay, so,
We used to have a share bike, there was a share bike in town a few years.
yeah, there was a line.
The linemen, they went away, yeah.
I had one sit in front of my house for 3 weeks.
You
Yeah.
had one sitting in front of your house.
I left it there. They told.
Great things are coming out.
Okay,
The electric vehicles will have a lot more impact.
now on to. We're ahead of ourselves now.
I'll slow down.
Municipal, sustainable building guidelines. And this is a continuation of, we started talking about, well, it's been an ongoing discussion over the years with the planning committee, and then we talked about it last month. And I think as Michael articulated a few minutes ago, that the Permanent Public Buildings Committee only does what they're directed to. And from my conversations with Gabby, this is really our role would be, we're not writing the municipal building guidelines, and we got into a little bit of the weeds last time. We would be spurring, recommending to the select board that this get done. And if need be, a working group, and presumably we would have some input on that.
But we tried, frankly, I tried from a Green Need perspective, working with the PVPC. If we were hired to go and say to the select board, you need to give them, not the cover, but the direction, because the PVPC is already doing as much of this as it can. Okay, but if the select board says, this is what we want you to do, we want this to be the priority for you, then the PVPC can do a lot more than it currently can.
And yeah, and this is something that I think with the Climate Action Planning Committee, that was one of the first things that Hank Half brought up, was that we'd like to do this, but it's not an art.
Specifically, what is the goal for this?
So correct me if I'm wrong, Gabby, but right now, the goal, the public buildings, it's primarily based on first cost, isn't it?
You don't know how they prioritize who to give a bid to, or?
In terms of design considerations.
Yeah, the considerations that would basically say, I think the BBC tries to do this when it works with designers, who works with us, right? But to have the select board say, we want you to prioritize getting these buildings as close to net, having them be sustainable as possible, right?
Or
That gives the
even,
BBC more open to working with the designers and saying, this is what we want to see, and then going to town meeting and saying, this is what we need to do. This is how we can do this building.
Independent of cost, or?
No,
Well,
it
it
never
would
be
be-
independent
it
of cost, right?
I think one of the things that Hank was saying was that looking at life cycle costs versus
Right.
first cost.
That's the issue.
And right now, as I understand it, their purview is, these other things are nice, but first cost. So our hope maybe as a catalyst would be to say, let's drive a conversation, a direction to consider other consideration, consider sustainability, consider greenhouse gas.
Life cycle costs too, value, right? That's to me is very important because, well, that's life cycle costs and the operating costs, right? Because if this is the PPBC can push on that, right? This notion it's all about getting the lowest cost bid for the building, right? As opposed to what the building may cost to run. Right? And so being able to make that part of it, that if the trade-off is we're gonna pay a little more for this building, but it's gonna start saving the money right away, right? In the reduced costs, in better health, in better, effectiveness in the building, then we should try to prioritize that.
And from the CAC standpoint, we're looking at really emphasizing the climate aspects of both new buildings and renovations
And I think,
beyond what's required by code.
and I think Hank mentioned, I believe Hank mentioned something to the effect that, he was talking about Pollard, with their incentives to heading towards net zero.
Right, but I think
I mean, financial incentives from the state.
Yeah.
Coming to us. heading towards net zero.
but the goal here is to codify and say to the select board, we would like this. We recommend, not we would like, we recommend.
Recommend that you.
I don't know, are we at a point to make that recommendation, or should we?
Or what are we recommending, lifestyle?
Well,
We're not doing it tonight. but the
I
idea
know,
is
but I
that's
guess
what we
the
wanna
question
work
is,
towards.
we want to work towards recommending that the town develop municipal sustainable building guidelines for new construction and renovation for municipal buildings. And my feeling is this is something that would be better to do soon. It doesn't have to wait till we do our FY 26. It's not on a timetable of town meeting or.
Nope.
There's no reason to wait, I guess.
So you mentioned, like, zoning guidelines for municipal buildings, do we have any control or any power over like private buildings? Or is that kind of?
That's not, yeah, so that's.
This is purely the.
They could be, I mean,
I mean, building code is the stretch code that
Yeah.
we passed.
Specialized.
They'll have to specify.
Yeah.
Dictate
That has
has an impact on all construction.
And if we, right after this town meeting, we're supposed to be able to then actually start the large house review committee, that can have an impact if we're looking at, what are the size houses coming around? Is there a reduction in size of the houses? What reduction, if any, is a reduction in, I don't know if we're gonna have any tree clearing lot policy going on, but what impact that would have some impact.
but I think to Andre's point, we can't tell private developers, thou shalt not, but we can serve as a bully pulpit, and we can, as an example, because people, that's where that.
We can
Although
educate.
Well, we're only 3% of emissions in Needham, but people always say, well, what's the town doing? Why aren't they doing that? And
What's only 3% emissions?
the municipal
Oh,
emissions,
yeah.
but as an example. And so I think that's where the power of this comes in. Stephen.
So just a couple of questions. Gabby, I think last time we met, you had mentioned that Wellesley's sustainable building guidelines are undergoing review. Do you know when that might be available, even in draft form for us to take a look at? And then the second question I have is there something short of a full municipal building guidelines that we could take action in short order? So for example, if it is as simple as recommending that the town take into account or at least evaluate life cycle costs in addition to first costs when evaluating renovations and new building construction, municipal, I mean, that might be a simple recommendation to make to the select board that could give them an impetus to ask the PVVC to start doing that while we wait for a more detailed.
So Gabby did send that in one of the emails, the Wellesley draft, and I think there's also.
That is the draft. That's not, no, that's the February 2021.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
so
so that's the
that's
old
what they
one.
have in place right now, and I believe they're hoping to get an updated version by the end of calendar year 2024.
Okay.
But I am happy to check in and ask if they're willing to share a draft at this point. I know they're this is an ongoing priority for them that they want to get done, so I'm happy to ask about that. I'm not sure about that approach. I guess we could do it as like a recommendation for a policy and have it be like a very concise recommendation to specifically account for life cycle costs. Is that what you're kind of proposing, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm asking, yeah, something short of a full policy could be just
Yeah.
guidance to come forth with both a first cost and life cycle cost analysis of whatever scenarios they're considering. Seems like a rather non-controversial ask. I mean, I would imagine that anybody who's evaluating plans would want to see both of those things, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
Will they know what we mean by life cycle costs, or would that need,
It's misleading.
yeah,
I think we could,
yeah.
to Stephen's point, we could craft a recommendation that puts it, in the interest of municipal sustainability, climate reduction. We recommend you take this first step and lay out the reasons that life cycle cost analysis, in a brief definition, takes into account the cost reductions due to sustainability. And I think we could create a recommendation like that, and it shouldn't be controversial.
It's not a big ask? Or is it? How much more expensive is it to ask that be,
That number be run.
that they solicit all that, study that stuff? I mean, just to anticipate what the reaction will be, it's one thing that.
We actually often ask for that.
Yeah, I mean, it is an easy ask.
It's just to formalize the policy and maybe put it,
Make it more of a priority for people to see.
and then,
Okay.
because I think the question that Hank, who is I'm blanking on his actual title.
Director.
Director of Facilities and Construction.
Was his request that, it's done by practice, but it's not codified. And we can phrase it kind of as a first step toward, and I think if we phrase it as a first step, then the board knows that, well, we'll come back with step 2.
Yeah, would it be helpful? I'm just thinking like off the top of my head, I don't know of specific policies in other communities that I could point to for this. I'm not saying we have to do this, but would it be helpful for the committee members if I tried to identify some examples in other cities and towns so we could look at how this has been modeled in other communities?
If it's a lot of work, no, because it's such an obvious financial ask, is to say, the idea is we really want to be looking at more than the initial cost. That's not a controversial thing. It's just business sense. I mean, I'd rather you spend your time on other things unless you thought it was easy to do.
Okay.
What might be helpful is in conjunction with the ask, though, to provide some examples to the select board of other projects in other towns that had life cycle costs alongside birth costs. So the Lexington schools comes into mind.
Would it be, I could, or one of us could sit down with Hank, who could probably
Yeah.
lay out the case.
I can do that.
He's probably got it written already.
Yeah.
So I think our goal is to to come back with a recommendation to the select, at least a draft recommendation by the next meeting. Is that,
Sounds good.
Sounds like an easy ask, actually.
okay, and now? Kathy,
Sustainability managers report. All right. The last agenda item, so, the recommendation of, the committee members, rather than going through this item by item, I, am planning to just highlight a couple things that are new on this list in the interest of time, and then if folks have questions about other items on the list, you know, I'm happy to spend time talking about any of these that might need a little bit more detail. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just touch on the ones that I don't think we talked at all about last meeting. So for mitigation, item number 9, I just added in here that we're starting to work with Eversource on getting a Main Streets initiative in Needham, which I believe was done previously with Green Needham. So for those who aren't familiar with it, basically working with Eversource, we have a designated vendor already in Needham. It's AECOM. And what they do is basically like a big outreach push to anyone who's identified as a commercial customer through Eversource. And so they offer free energy audits, to those send out postcards, do social media, and then commercial customers in Needham can sign up for an audit in advance. AECOM does all the heavy lifting in terms of actually going out and doing those audits. They'll also do some door knocking if they haven't heard from folks and they want to see if they're interested in doing an audit on the spot. But it's a nice way to let people know that this is an opportunity to get their buildings assessed. And then they'll also speak to them about opportunities for weatherization and electrification as well. I'll note that houses of worship are included as commercial customers, and right now there's a great partnership with Mass Interfaith, where they're actually covering 100% of installation costs. So it's a really nice benefit for houses of
I
worship.
just found, you know, again, Eversource does a lousy job of talking about these things. I
Mhm.
found out about it when I went to the Congregational Church's dedication of their solar. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
we promoted this several times in the past, we Needham did. And so the biggest challenge with Eversource and these programs is basically getting the word out from them
Yeah.
and asking, you know, who do you contact at Eversource for questions on this?
Mhm.
It would be enormously helpful to figure out who the contact is on a regular basis for those. AECOM is a good vendor. We went through this a couple of times with really horrible vendors. It was a disaster. But AECOM is
the
good.
last time they did it, we also, I mean, one of the things I think that when we get to this, to bring in other resources like the Chamber and Green Needham and the Needham Channel actually did some things on, they did work at their building and filmed it, and so
We promoted it.
did some nice
Yeah.
outreach on that to beyond what Eversource and AECOM do.
Oh, that's a great idea. I know, I've been meeting with Amy, who's our director of community engagement. Famous title. And JP, who's our economic development manager. So the hope is that the three of us will help to support the outreach for this and make it an effective outreach event.
And I think the extent to which they can focus on, there's a set of programs that would particularly be good for restaurants, food service, because there's a whole different set of HVAC and other stuff than people who just have an office building.
Yeah.
So the extent we can have that kind of information, and then also just figure out how to time it. The problem with businesses is they're busy. and it's hard to talk to them about it, right? So thinking about how best to reach them at times when people can actually listen is a challenge.
Yeah, I'm hopeful because they're
great.
doing outreach early and we'll support that on the town side to let folks know this is coming, that people would schedule something at a time that works for them, but it's true, it's a time barrier for sure.
So then we're working on an article on the Congregational Church's work, which we will probably Green Needham, so make sure about that, because in addition, I mean, this big solar up, they took advantage of that.
The
Program.
installation program.
So
Oh,
it's
that's
important to
great.
get people to understand, you gotta do the stuff in the building.
Yeah.
So that'd be great.
Okay. Um,
Michael, did you hear, I'm from the Congregational Church as well, and I don't know if you heard about the proposal to insulate the attic of the church was very disappointing.
Yeah.
They were gonna seal up the ridge vent and make the attics, all completely closed off and this.
It didn't work, but it didn't come.
It's-
with the.
Well,
usage of the attic.
it wasn't, we decided it was gonna trap moisture and it was.
Yeah,
It's bad design.
Bad design.
Yeah, that's the
Which-
thing you have to watch out for.
I mean, this program allows you to go out to multiple vendors, so I'll just say, if you got a bad quote from someone, go out and get another.
Well, it's amazing.
There's about like 1,000 different
There's a bunch of vendors who
for-
qualify for the program.
Yeah.
Just like
they're
investment.
fantastic, yeah. Yeah, we've all seen a bad quote before. The next item I'll just mention on here very briefly is that we had a attendance at the Alt Wheels Fleet Day. And that was a nice opportunity to meet with electric vehicle vendors, folks who are responsible for charging equipment, and hear from other communities who are working on their fleet electrification journey. We had great conversations with folks from Cambridge in particular who are starting to dip their toes into medium and heavy duty fleet electrification. So nice to get some lessons learned from those folks. Also related to electric vehicles, we have submitted our FY24 qualified projects for to the IRS for pre-registration for clean energy tax credits. It's also known as direct pay or elective pay. So in FY24, we only had one type of qualifying credit that we met, which was the electric vehicles. There's really three that we can, that we're eligible for here in Needham, which is electric vehicles and then solar or geothermal projects. So for FY24, we had 6 electric vehicle purchases that qualified, which amounts to about $45,000. So for this process with the IRS, we have to submit those projects for review. So we submit all of our documentation for those vehicles to basically show that the town owns them and they were purchased in that year. Then once we get that sign off from the IRS, they'll assign us a registration number, and then we have to file tax documentation for each of those vehicles. And then once that goes through, we will get our rebate back from the feds for that. So I've been working with our lovely town accountant, Michelle, on that.
And that's basically now the town and nonprofits too can
Yeah.
get,
Yeah.
can
Right.
get the benefits that if private
you
citizen
and I
or
can get.
business, gets those tax credits.
Yeah,
Just to-
it's a big
And it's
deal.
really exciting.
And it's great because
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
able
we
to
we
stack
install,
those with.
yeah, we install
with
solar
states.
at the Historical Society and they're going through the same process.
Yeah, thanks. And then I'll just mention, while on here, I think this came up actually at a climate action planning committee meeting, but that was a while ago. So the town has gone out to bid for energy procurement advisory services, basically our energy broker. So we use a broker for natural gas. Right now, we're actually on the Eversource basic rate for Wait, is that switched? Yeah, we're on the Eversource basic rate for electric. Our contract was up with our current broker, so we went out to bid. We received several competitive bids. Ended up being a total of 5. So we've gone through the process of doing interviews and now we're reviewing price proposals. And this is gonna be an important service for us because these folks also provide guidance on other sustainability related topics. So as we think about like PPAs versus ownership for solar, or we think about taking advantage of SREC purchases to offset our carbon emissions, things like that, they're a helpful resource for the town. So I can keep folks updated as we move forward with that process. And I think those are the only new items. Yeah, does anyone have any questions about anything else that was listed on the report?
Looks good.
Okay. Oh, Stephen?
Just one quick question for your one, just to put on your radar, is I keep hearing from developers that Eversource has been quoting, over a year for transformer installations for new construction.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, because some of it's supply of the material, which is more of a federal thing. But
Yeah.
if there's anything that we can do to continue to put pressure on Eversource, that you can think about, we should be having that on our radar. It's a pretty big blocker.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've heard all over the Northeast.
Yeah.
It's a genuine problem.
How is that a
there's-
federal problem?
Part of it is like a supply chain issue. So companies like Amazon have been just buying transformers in
There's
huge
import,
numbers.
there's import tariffs on a lot of the equipment. They're using the Defense Authorization Act to try to spur local manufacturers to build it. But there's labor supply issues. So there's a lot of things that are gumming up the works. But part of it might also be Eversource. I don't know.
You also get, I mean, I've seen this with every utility, and to a degree, they're all the same. They're intransigent, but then as you get things like Helene, all the available transformers are gonna be going to
That's true.
North Carolina, not to Needham or Parsippany.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, one question too, how do they prioritize transfer allocations once they do happen?
Yeah.
It is challenging.
Well,
It's not just federal, it's just the supply. They're just trying to catch up. They just can't build
Well,
transformers
well,
fast.
part of it's also during hurricane season, part of it is, resources, materials, but also resources of personnel fees. They start sending a lot of trucks, so we get into issues with transformers related to our solar installations because of that. Some related to that, but in general, we've been more on a 2 to 5 month log as far as transformers go for ourselves.
But it's a good issue to be aware of.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Especially hurricane season.
Yeah, I'm hearing 18 months for EV charging stations.
Wow. That's a
Yeah,
18 months.
Yeah.
twos.
for level 2s and level 3s. Yeah. But
What's the major bottleneck?
I mean, I think supply chain is honestly the biggest piece, but Eversource, I agree with what you're saying, Stephen. Like, I think some of it is also Eversource like catching up as the grid has to deal with more electrification. So some of it's like a Eversource staffing issue of like, do they have the capacity to cover this many requests in a short period of time? I think it's coming from a lot of different angles. I'm happy to bring it up with them. I do think that I've heard similar things from folks who are in National Grid territory as well, that they're getting longer timelines, but
Gary, you specifically referring to like the Newman thing? The timetable, where project is?
Stephen cited it.
yeah, I mean, I'm hearing that from other communities who are trying to work with Eversource and National Grid on EV charging stations, that they're being told if you are going for a charging station and you put in your work order with Eversource now, you should expect you'll have that charger in 18 months.
We have bids for ours, we're waiting on pricing, we have pricing, right?
For Newman. Yeah, we have a couple quotes for that. We're still waiting to hear back from 2 more vendors.
Can't get an electric bus until it gets done, so,
I know,
and it's in our capital plan for next year, so.
yeah.
Okay, any
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn, anyone?
Second?
Who made the motion? Or-
And we need a,
Yes.
Roll call.
okay, Michael.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Roger. Stephen,
Aye.
Cameron,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. Why not?
Alright, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you.